Hey guys, what's up? Geralt of Rivia, also known as the Witcher. I think he's the coolest new sort of like fantasy character hero that we've had in a long time. He's pretty cool. He's even been compared to Elric of Melniboné, you know? He's cool. He's got like this deep raspy voice, sort of like Batman, you know, which it was kind of weird when Batman came out with that voice because the original Batman back in the day didn't have that voice. And for some reason, just like in the movies, there's just all of a sudden he just started talking with this deep voice. And Geralt of Rivia kind of has that same voice. He's pretty cool. He's got like long white hair, which is sort of like Elric. But what's interesting in the series, if you watch the Netflix series, I'm not sure about season 1, but in season 2, his hair is gray, and so are all of the other Witchers. All their hair is gray, or not like, or some of them are actually. I think some of them are different, but a few of them are like, you know, the other Witcher that was sort of like in season 2 also had gray hair, you know. And what's interesting, he's been compared to Elric because he's appeared with white hair, and like in the video game, The Witcher 2: Assassins of Kings, he had white hair, you know. And so the thing about The Witcher is that he's a cool character. You know, he carries 2 swords on his back, right? He can do magic. He can fight with weapons, melee weapons. He kills monsters for a living. Like, he kills monsters, he gets hired to kill monsters. However, he's not beyond killing a monster because it's the right thing to do. You know, if a monster is terrorizing a village or something in the medieval fantasy world that he's in, you know, killing that monster, he's not gonna like stand by and watch that monster destroy the village and say, well, you know, if the village doesn't pay me, I'm not gonna slay that dragon or that monster or whatever it is, or that beast. And then he probably would, you know, even though he usually gets paid for it. And usually, you know, the village will, like, the rich people in the village will gladly give him tons of gold just to get rid of this monster, you know. He would do it just because it's the right thing to do. He's a good guy. He's a good character. You know, Elric wasn't that good. He was okay. He was good relative to, like, everyone in his world. But, this guy's actually really good. He's not a hero, though. Like, he's not like a savior hero. You know, he's not there to save the world. You know, he still only cares about drinking and I don't know, like he still, you know, falls in love, and he cares about, like, there's a lot of romance in it where he falls in love with like some of the other characters in the story, like Yennefer and whatever. I don't know to what degree he's in love with Yennefer because they're kind of like separated in the series. But the character was cool. I know the game was cool because it was just like you can pretty much fight with a sword. You've got armor. It's medieval fantasy, and you also have spells. You know, he's only got like a few spells in the game, but they're pretty cool. Like shoot fire from fingers, shoot like some kind of like force blast and whatever it is. All different. There's a few other ones that you can do in the game, which is a lot of fun. But that's a really cool character. I think like a combination between fighter and wizard, because I really can't decide who I like more, fighters or wizard. I kind of like wizards more than fighters, but I still like fighters because I like swords and armor and shields and stuff like that, and sort of like those melee weapons. And taking on a monster, you need magic and you need like melee weapons, because like the weakness of wizards is that they're not strong, and they're not good at using like swords and stuff like that. They'll have a staff, right, which is like harder to use actually than a sword, you know. But they're only like, if their magic doesn't work, then they're gone, they're done, because they're not like a strong character at all, and they'll never like withstand an attack by a monster. They're just like, you know, if their magic doesn't work, they're gone, you know. And the thing about steel and the sword is the sword works. You just have to wield it properly. You have to get good with it. And if you can fight well with a sword, you've got a defense. And it's not like this magic thing that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. It's a real defense. And so the reason I think he's the coolest character, the coolest fantasy character of recent times, is because there hasn't been a cool fantasy character in like a really, really long time. I mean, there have been a few of them. But if you look at the big fantasy characters like Conan the Barbarian, Elric of Melniboné, you'll see like Conan the Barbarian goes way back. Conan the Barbarian goes way back into like the 40s and 50s of last century. Elric is in the 60s and 70s. You know, there were other heroes like John Carter of Mars, right? That goes back also to like the time of around the same time as Conan the Barbarian. You know, that character is pretty old. It's not even like, I mean, not counting superheroes, because obviously, because even superheroes are just like, you know, the ones that are still good and relevant today came out a long time ago. You know, Superman, Batman, all these guys, they came out a long time ago. You know, but fantasy heroes, like, that's not, you know, not superhero, fantasy, like fantasy heroes that are you know, that are in like a fantasy story. You know, yeah, you know, you could say that John Constantine is a cool fantasy hero, but he's not really a hero, right? He's just more of a character in a story. He does good sometimes. He's not really loved or looked at as a hero. A lot of people don't like him because they know wherever John Constantine goes, trouble follows. And a lot of people just don't want him around because things do go wrong when he's around, because all of these like, you know, bad magic, bad mojo, bad voodoo, all that stuff happens when he's around. So people don't want him around, you know, because he's just involved in the occult and magic and spirits and ghosts and demons and all of these things that are following him around, trying to take him down. Like if you watch the movie with Keanu Reeves, he's like basically, you know, all of these demons that he's like kind of like banished to hell, they want revenge on him. You know, they will take any chance to get back at him. He's really like marked by these demons, devils, whatever, like evil spirits. You know, and people just don't want that. He's not necessarily a fantasy hero, and he's definitely not medieval fantasy. You know, but even though like he's a good, like, he's pretty powerful hero. I like him a lot, but I think that the thing about like Geralt is he's got a cool factor. Like, he's a cool hero. You know what I mean? He's really a hero, and he fits like a hero, and he's got the whole fantasy thing going where he's like, he's got magic, he's got swords, he wears armor. Doesn't really necessarily wear armor. He wears like leather armor or some kind of a thing, but he still can wear armor, and he's in a world where people do wear armor. And people do use swords and stuff like that. And even though, like, yeah, John Constantine, but it's like you can't really compare the two. Constantine is an urban fantasy kind of thing, where he's like a modern sort of like, and I wouldn't call him a cool hero. I would call him a cool character in the story. I think he's a really cool, interesting character, but I wouldn't call him a hero at all. You know, but if you look at like even like any like heroes, like what about Tarzan? Way before, right? Tarzan came from the 30s and 40s or something like that. Came like way back in the last century was Tarzan. And Tarzan is like, there's only so much Tarzan, I don't know, that you can kind of like get into. Because the Tarzan is like, basically, he can control the animals in the jungle. And he can swing around. You know, but he's pretty cool, but I don't know, it's like, I wouldn't compare him to like a real fantasy hero. He's more of like a fantasy story, but not like a medieval fantasy story. The whole story is fantasy with Tarzan, but it's not a medieval fantasy. You know, Tarzan is not. He doesn't have swords. He has a dagger, and that's it. You know, it's more like a jungle fantasy than it is a medieval fantasy, and so I wouldn't call him a fantasy hero because he's not really a hero of anything. He's Tarzan. I don't know enough about Tarzan or the stories that, like, does he save people, or, you know, does he get into situations where he like saves the day? Does he do anything heroic? You know, or does he just like, or are there villains that are after him and he tries to like survive them or something like that? So I don't know. It's like Tarzan was cool, but Tarzan's way long ago. Even if you like him, or even if you say he's a good hero or not, he's still way long ago. So I can't think of any like modern like heroes. Like maybe in the 80s there was some fantasy heroes that came out in movies, you know, but a fantasy hero, like if you look at like some of the fantasy heroes that came out on TV, you'd see like Xena Warrior Princess. She's a cool fantasy hero. She really is. She's got that thing where she like throws it and comes back, that circular disc that you can throw and it comes back. She's pretty good. You know, it's just that like her TV show, even though I like it, is only like it does get a little bit repetitive, where they revisit the same kind of ideas show after show after show. It's like very, very much the same show. And it's a little bit outdated, where like the modern shows are a lot better than the older shows were. Like the, you know, even like, but back in the day, it was a decent show that people used to watch, you know, but you couldn't say like, that wasn't recent, that was like in the 90s or something like that, right? And then like Hercules Legendary Journeys. Okay, Hercules is not a fantasy hero, he's a god. He's a half god, you know, and he's a mythological hero. Hercules, you can't, you know, it's like, you could say mythology is fantasy or mythology is religion, but he's a mythological hero. He's not a fantasy hero. And if you think about it, like, who else, you know, is someone that's sort of like Geralt of Rivia, that's not Conan the Barbarian or Elric of Melniboné or any of the Eternal Champions? You know, very, very few, because there wasn't a lot of comic books, movies, or books. Well, I'm not going to count books, because there were a lot of heroes. Like, there's just a lot of books to actually read, and I'm sure there's lots of heroes that are in books. You know, the main character of the Xanth series by Piers Anthony, he's a hero, whatever it is, you know, but I didn't get into that enough to actually like comment on it. I read some of the first book and I kind of didn't get into it, but it was still okay. It was still good. I like Piers Anthony's stuff. But a known person, you know, like people know when you say Conan the Barbarian, they know who that is. Maybe Elric of Melniboné is less known, you know, but then Geralt of Rivia, a lot of people who are into fantasy and have Netflix basically saw the series or played the game. You know, so you kind of like know who he is. And I mean like popular, cool hero. The only other one I'm thinking about is John Carter of Mars. And the thing about John Carter of Mars is he's not necessarily like, I mean, he is kind of heroic. Like, the story is a hero story, you know? It is more of a science fiction, though. Even though it's got fantasy elements in it, it's still more of science fiction, because the thing that teleports him to Mars is a science-based thing. It's science it's science that's advanced enough that looks like magic, but it's just very advanced science. The thing that, like, whatever that disc or whatever thing it was that transports him to Mars, and he has this adventure in Mars. And his only real power is the fact that he's used to the gravity on Earth. And so what they do is they exaggerate that, where like, yeah, in Mars, you can kind of like bounce up and down. Sort of like when you look at the astronauts on the moon, they're kind of like bouncing up and down because the gravity's so light on the moon that you're able to like jump, and you jump a lot higher because the gravity's so light. And so it's sort of like that with Mars, and so therefore he can jump higher. But if you look at the story, like even in the movie, he jumps like 35 feet in the air. If you look at like, and you're a lot heavier on Mars than you are on the moon. And if you look at the lunar lander people, you know, the lunar astronauts, like when they jump up, they've jumped they may go 10, 15 feet and they come back down, you know. And Mars, you wouldn't be able to do that. You might jump maybe 10 feet into the ground, like up and then down, you know, but 35 or like 50 feet or something, you probably wouldn't do that. So it is exaggerated a lot. And I think it was also written at a time where people knew that the gravity of Mars was lighter, but they didn't actually know how much lighter, and they weren't sure. Like, it was done before astronauts went to the moon, as far as I know. I think it was done way before 1960, the late 60s, right? And so like, I think that the whole thing was exaggerated a lot, that he's able to jump like 50 feet in the air because he's from Earth and he's used to the gravity on Earth, which is, he probably would be able to jump like maybe 10 feet in the air, maybe less, maybe 8 feet in the air, but I don't think he'd be able to do like 35 feet into the air or whatever it is. The story was pretty cool. It had all of the different characters and everything, and it had the princess. I think the Princess of Mars is a cooler character than John Constantine of Mars. Whatever guy's name was, John something of Mars. Okay, yeah. So John Carter of Mars, and the princess is a cooler character, and you know this. You know she's a cooler character. A lot of people like her because people cosplay as her rather than John Carter. Like a lot, not a lot of people cosplay as John Carter, but a lot of people cosplay as Princess of Mars. If you just look at all the Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram models dressing up as Princess of Mars, you know, you could see how much like they love Princess of Mars and they want to dress up as her more than they want to dress up like John Carter. I think, you know, John Carter's okay, but with just, and I'm sure like if you read the stories, it's probably like there's a long thing that's going on. But in my experience, John Carter was a very, very, like, it was a small movie. It was sort of like a 2-hour movie. I just don't think his cool factor was, he's good. I mean, you're on board with him being a hero and saving Mars and saving the princess and saving Earth and whatever. But even John Carter of Mars was just after gold. That's really what he wanted. He wanted to find a gold mine and stuff like that. And the adventure is interesting and it's really cool, but is he a cool character? Maybe he's cool to some degree, but I don't think he's as cool as like Geralt of Rivia with his deep voice and his double sword and his magic and all the elixirs and all the frickin' the potions and the monsters and this whole world is cool. You know, like it's, you know, like Yennefer, that's a cool name, Yennefer, right? Even if the characters, whatever, if you got into the series or not, I think it got like an 8.2 out of 10 in whatever, somebody in popular vote, whatever it is, as to how good the series is. And yeah, I kind of agree. I kind of agree that's the level of the series, but that's just because that's the level of the series. I think the character is cool, and the whole world is cool, and the whole idea of that character where he like fights to kill monsters is a cool idea. And he's not really, you know, and he, you know, and he is kind of heroic. He does do the right thing, and there's a lot of good relationships in that series. Where, you know, he looks after other people. And that's really what I like about that series also. They really, like, the people in the series put other people's in before themselves. You know, they try to, they risk their own life to save other people. And that's always heroic. And that's always something valiant. And it's like very, you feel like, oh, this person's doing the right thing. You know, they're risking their own life to save their friend, who may or may not be their friend. But they know them, they're friendly with them, and the other person's in trouble. Obviously, they like them, and so they risk their own life to save them. And that's kind of like what he does. You know, in the series, there's a lot of him like risking his life to save friends and to do other things. Obviously, I haven't really watched all the series, and I think this whole story, this whole world of Geralt of Rivia is a huge world, and there's a lot to see in it. Just the cool factor of it, you know, it's nice. What I like about the story is I like Geralt, I like that character, and I like the whole backdrop. I like the whole like the world that he's in, and the, you know, the monsters and the whole fantasy thing, the whole thing about, you know, and all the other peripheral characters that are in that kind of world. And I think the characters are cool, and I think like Geralt is cool, and I think he's the coolest like fantasy character I've seen, fantasy hero character like that I've seen in a really, really long time, who's just a cool character that you can get behind. You're like, he's cool. You know, there's other characters, but like you're like, no, he is like, he's a really cool one. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments. Like and subscribe. Check out my other videos. Share the video with your friends if you want, if they like this kind of thing. And I will see you guys in another video later.